When I played Ninja Gaiden on the original Xbox back in the days, rest in peace Hurricane Pack, I didn't understand just how good it was. I didn't have the knowledge of concepts like pacing, animation, audio, responsivity. It spoiled me. It set the bar so high that a lot of games just couldn't reach it. They didn't click like NG. But now, many years later, after experiencing hundreds of games, learning about game design and working in the industry for almost a decade, replaying it made me realize that it is a pinnacle of action. Let me tell you just how good it is. One of the most important aspects in an action game is just how responsive it is. How it feels to steer the main character. How long it takes the game to process what was pressed. How it handles multiple inputs. Ninja Gaiden might have been one of the major reasons why it's so important to me that the game doesn't feel floaty to control. Getting immediate audio-visual feedback from the game right after pressing the button connects on a completely different level. The avatar on the screen becomes an extension of an arm. Whatever I think, it instantly does. It feels so satisfying to control. There is no awkward pause between the button being pressed and the action being displayed on the monitor. In some games, there are special animations to show that an action is unavailable. In Sands of Time, Prince will play this animation when he tries to run on a slippery wall. It is a cool way to show, in an organic way, why some actions are unavailable. Contextualize the game world while looking sleek. In NG, that's not the case. There are no animations like that. Ryu either can wall run on a model or he can't. And I love it. Because while those animations are fantastic, the issue with them is that they need to take away the control from the player for a moment. And truth be told, I don't need the game to tell me a reason as to why I can't wall run on a steel fence. Having Ryu just not do it is enough of a reason for me. I don't need a special animation to show why that is. Although, to be fair, I strongly believe that even if those animations were implemented, it would still be possible to cancel them the moment they start. The degree to which it's possible to cancel animations in NG is astounding. Here, Ryu is still in the jump animation. This is the very last frame before he touches the wall. In the next frame you can see him do just that, as he changes the animation to the wall landing one. But he doesn't have to finish this landing animation to start the next jump. A frame, a pixel of his body touched the wall, is the frame he is already receiving the next input. So, the next frame, Ryu is already starting the next jump. Ryu was playing the wall landing animation for the grand total of a single frame. A single frame. It's not possible to make him more responsive without breaking the animation. This is as responsive as it gets. However, practically speaking, it would be impossible for the player to input a frame-perfect wall jump every single time while he ascends a tall elevator shaft. Good thing is that he doesn't have to do that. The amazing animation cancelling wouldn't be usable by the player if not for the input buffering. Instead of losing the input while Ryu is unavailable, the input is instead stored for a couple of frames and used immediately once it's possible to input the next action. This allows the player to actually use those incredible animation cancels, making the gameplay feel both responsive and quick. The player doesn't have to be the most precise human being on the planet Earth to feel like a rampaging ninja on a quest for vengeance. Yeah, he did that from time to time. Sometimes Ryu attacked an enemy who wasn't the true target. With some of the attacks it's just not possible to change the target that Ryu will go for. So, sometimes he acts like he has his own mind, and it almost doesn't matter how you input the action, he will do his thing. But, even if he doesn't hit the proper enemy, he at least does that quickly. Yeah, the camera is also very problematic. It's surprisingly hard to control during certain fights, and during some other ones it's positioned in the most notorious way possible. Very often I had to reposition, not because I stood in a wrong spot, but because I just wasn't able to see the enemies from the place I stood in. When I turned off audio, I realized just how much I relied on it to tell where the enemies are and what they are up to. Suddenly, I wasn't able to tell what is happening, and I was very anxious as to what is going on, because the camera view by itself just doesn't provide enough information. Yeah, right. This is also pretty hard to control, very cumbersome. Okay, I get it. There's an awful lot of actions that are miserable to control. Water walking feels like controlling king crab, swimming sucks, and if I have to shoot even one more radio tower, I'm gonna eat my controller. But it doesn't matter. Those actions, they do suck, but while they do gargle some major balls, they are not that important. Fortunately, more important aspects like responsivity, audio design and motion of animations are cranked to 11. I will always see and hear dodge roll jump whenever I hear Ninja Gaiden. An iconic movement pattern that is so great to perform that it feels illegal to move only by running around. I will never forgive that in the rest of the games it was taken away and replaced with this. But it's not the only thing that the following releases took away. Another reason why I love the first entry the most is pacing. Unlike the following releases where you go through arena, corridor, arena, here the game world structure is a bit more open-ended. Tayron City acts as the main hub, with each chapter unlocking a new area to which the player has to travel to continue the journey. However, unlike in a more linear game, the player is always able to revisit already unlocked places, unless he destroys them. So, while there is still only one route to the next objective, the player can navigate around the entire world freely before going forward. He can farm repeating encounters, visit a shop, maybe look around for some hidden treasures. It's calming. In a game where action is tense and fights end in a matter of seconds, this more open structure of the game allows the player to just vibe around for a while before he has to squeeze the controller again during an unforgiving encounter. Player can just cruise his way through the level while his attention recovers a bit. Do you really? To be quite frank, I highly doubt that you want the pace to remain high at all times. Even the most action-heavy movies like John Wick have moments where the pace is brought down for a bit. Overstimulation is tiring. I had that problem in Razor's Edge. The game is incapable of giving you 3 minutes of downtime. Even the corridors between locations are full of action. This makes it so hard to continue playing after a nerve-wracking boss fight. I wasn't able to play very long sessions. I would wind down with a turn-based strategy between missions. And in the first entry, whenever I felt overwhelmed and tired, I would just roam around, farm an easy fight and look for scarabs. Wait, why do I hear boss music? Whenever I read or hear somewhere that Ninja Gaiden is one of the hardest games out there, I think to myself that I don't agree. Ninja Gaiden is actually easy. Ryu Hayabusa is one of the most broken characters in video game history. The amount of iframe he has is so ridiculously high that it's hard to even grasp. He is untargetable during grabs, charge attacks, counters and nimpo. He can always block almost everything, even in the middle of an attack animation. And when his guard is broken, he can regain it by simply dodging. Remember kids, spikes are just AI hallucination. But even the best defense doesn't win anything. The player still needs to kill the enemies to clear the encounter. This is where I want to bring up a very important concept. Danium from Pixel Poppers suggests that challenges in games can be split into 4 phases: preparation, strategy, tactics and action. First comes the preparation phase, which is about getting ready to deal with the game's challenges. Player preparation is about the player himself improving his own skills. If the player spends an hour learning a new combo to deal with the challenge, that effort will be categorized as preparation. The same goes for in-game preparation, which includes acquiring new options like finding additional weapons or improving already obtained ones by upgrading them. In Ninja Gaiden, the player might farm an easy, repeating encounter in order to buy the entire stock of potions and scrolls of resurrection. The next phase of the challenge is strategy. This phase is about defining a framework for handling game's challenges. A plan of how the player is going to approach the problem is the first part of the strategy. It's basically a list of steps on how to approach the challenge ahead. Games that are more predictable in nature, like turn-based strategies, will have a more structured plan, while games that are more fluid will address hypothetical scenarios that can occur during gameplay. For instance, attack patterns of enemies in Ninja Gaiden are random. So, while the player can create reactions to each of the attacks the enemy has, he will not be able to create a plan that goes from the start of the combat to the very end of it. The next phase is tactics. This phase is about making choices in response to specific situations. First of all, the player has to be aware of the situation he's currently in. Understanding a myriad of different details about the current game state can be difficult. Just being aware of what is going on will allow the player to make a much better decision. In Ninja Gaiden, the player might often be faced with a decision what to do with a healing orb. When Ryu is low on health, it might be a good choice to heal up. But if the same decision has to be made during a boss fight, where an ultimate technique will kill the boss, while healing up will still not heal the player enough to survive an attack, the player might opt out of getting the orb, and instead use it to load the last UT. The last part of the challenge is action phase. This is the process of transmitting a decision back into the game to update the game state. If you ever lost a game and thought that you knew what to do but just didn't click the button on time, that's where you succeeded in tactics but failed in action phase. Not all games have to support each of those phases. Turn-based games, for example, will most likely not support action phase as the player can take his time to input his order. However, there are games that are the complete opposite and might rely entirely on the action phase, like Guitar Hero or Oz, where the only plan is to press the note and the best tactic is to do it on time. Ninja Gaiden is perceived to be quite demanding in the action phase. You do need to be quick to react to some of the enemy attacks. However, I strongly believe that the difficulty of that phase can be massively decreased if the player invests a bit of his time in other phases. As I mentioned before, it is possible to load Ryu with potions, scrolls and upgrades to the point where some fights are won by having a big wallet. Having like 15 Nimpo is a very massive advantage. Knowing which attacks bully which enemy is also very helpful. Player can use the extremely long ultimate range of Vigorian Flare to kill zombies with almost no problems. Murai seems quite tough, but he can be abused with Cicada Slash, which requires the player to jump on the wall and press Y. A good strategy makes the action phase a breeze. Investing time into other phases makes execution almost trivial. In some cases, all the player has to do is get to the proper position and then just hold a button. Or shoot a bow. Well, kinda. Performing those strategies doesn't require a lot from the player in the action phase. If he was to find those setups himself, he would have an awful lot of testing and strategizing in front of him. But, because he will just read the strat online, it does become quite cheap. Still, it does make the game much easier, in some cases almost trivial to complete. So, why? Why the game seems so hard? Why it's infamous or famous, depending on who's asked, for its difficulty? Why there's a notion that it will be impossible to finish? This graph shows the time it took me to finish each chapter on Master Ninja for the very first time in my life. Nothing too out of ordinary, except I didn't include the very first level. This single chapter brings the biggest difficulty spike I've experienced in the entire game. Going from very hard to Master Ninja difficulty made me cry, but only for a single chapter. After the first chapter, the difficulty crash landed like an airship and everything went smoothly again. So, what's wrong with this one level? Well, if you played the game, then you know that the only enemies that spawn on that level aside from bats, Murai and a handful of black ninjas are the red ninjas. So, it's them. Red ninjas are the problem. Yes, but it turns out they hit like trucks when Ryu doesn't have a health bar as wide as the entire screen, and it's quite hard to deal with them without fancy combos, or upgrades, or Nimpo. Remember when I said that the intensity of action phase can be greatly decreased by other phases? That's the reason why it was so much easier on lower difficulties. They appear so much further in the game, the player has access to so many different options and power-ups. He's loaded beyond imagination. You want a fright ninja? Or a squashed one will do. Ryu's power level itself is enough to get through these encounters. But it causes a problem. If the player doesn't engage in some kind of problem solving, then his ability to solve that problem will never increase. He'll never get better. So, because he can get through the fights with various setups and strategies, he doesn't even have to learn how the ninjas work. He never has to learn when in their combo he can safely attack. That they have a grab that goes through the block, or that they will most likely go for that grab right after dodging to the side. Or that if there's more than one of them, only one will engage the player while the rest will harass with explosives. This chapter is the only level in the entire game that forces the player to learn the basic mechanics of an enemy, not just a cheap strat that gets him through a specific fight. And this level helps so much in learning. It's amazing, I love it. It's created in a way that allows players to progressively learn how to deal with more and more of the enemies. Because they have restrictions as to when they will use their mechanics, the complexity of the fights is increased over time. At start, there's only one ninja at once, so he will never throw a kunai at the player. Then there's two of them to enable that explosive throw. Then there's three of them in an enclosed space. One of them is actually a black ninja, which does make it a bit easier to grasp the complexity of fighting three of them at once. However, this combat also allows the ninjas to use the walls to roam the space and attack the player from above. And then is the time for the hardest challenge in the entire game. 3 red ninjas at once, 12 in total, extremely small space to navigate inside, no Nimpo, no upgraded weapons with cool combos, no counterattacks, no resources, no shop to spend the tiny bit of essence acquired before the fight, no setups to abuse the AI, pure skill. But the beauty of this room is that once you get past it, there's almost nothing that could stop you. This room forces you to get so good that the rest of the game becomes trivial. Maybe not the easiest game of your life, but after finishing that one room, game's easy, man. Well, when I say the game is easy, it doesn't really mean that I won't die a lot. And it does sound counterintuitive, so let me explain. There's a clip of a speedrunner fighting Awakened Alma where he tries to go for a flying swallow and he fails again and again and again. So the question is, was trying to hit Alma like this a bad choice? Not really. This is a good attack to hit her and bring her down to get off a combo on the ground. But the problem is that the attack itself is not a guaranteed hit. Surprisingly enough, Ninja Gaiden is not as skill-oriented as some people might think. Sure, there is a lot of skill involved. However, sometimes there's just nothing the player can do aside from accepting the RNG. Even very optimized strategies can still fail. Tank can still drive around the crate and become able to hit the player. Murai can still manage to hit the player before he reaches the wall. However, even in the face of those failures, it still doesn't make those strategies harder to perform. Hiding behind a crate is still very easy. Pressing dodge, jump and then Y after landing on a wall is not that demanding. It's not hard, just inconsistent.
Lock in, lock in. Get it twisted? If you lock in, you can do anything? Motherfucker. Get it twisted. Your actions impact nothing. Your fate is predetermined. The only thing that you can change is your reaction to it. You can do anything you set your mind to. The world is a playground designed for you and only you to achieve your highest level ambitions. If you wait 90 minutes to wake up until you drink your first cup of coffee, nothing can stop you. If you duct tape your mouth, when you fall asleep, nothing can stop you. Get it twisted? You are a pawn in a universe chess match. You mean nothing to God, if they even exist. You're a rounding error. You're 2 pennies on a Fortune 500 company's balance sheet. They don't care about you in the slightest. Get it twisted? Everybody gets what they deserve in this life. If you put in effort, you can achieve anything. Successful people are better people. Get it twisted? The circumstances surrounding your birth determine where you are going to go. Nothing else matters at all. Your own level of education, your attitude, your level of effort, your friends, your network, your business, your credentials. Motherfucker!
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. If you want to ask something, I always respond to comments. You can also catch me on X or Blue Sky. See you next time. Good luck and have fun.